So the introduction is kind of long. It says a note tacked up on a refrigerator had these words: "It is better to be righteous than right." Today, individuals and groups are clamoring and clashing over rights: the right to free speech, the rights of the poor, the right to liberation, women's rights, Aboriginal rights, the right not to be bothered by smokers or non-smokers, the rights of animals, the rights of blacks, the rights of adoptees. So the group discussion question says, look at the list in the introduction above, brainstorm at least 10 more groups fighting for rights today. You may even make up a couple of new ones. So can we come up with 10 more groups that are fighting for their rights today?
I've got about 12 here.
Give us a couple.
How about renters' rights?
Yeah, yeah.
And having sexual rights,
Yes.
criminal rights for atheists, man-boy pedophilia, race, all kinds of race and non-masking, and I'll give you one more, racial rights for Muslims.
Yeah.
Just a few.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Others that you think of. What are some other rights people are fighting for today?
Right to be born.
Yes. So the right to life.
Animal rights, even
Yeah.
plant rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
people want the right to be called by the pronoun that they choose.
Yes. Yes.
Right to
Yep.
bear arms. They're still fighting to keep that.
Yes.
They have that
Yep.
right, but
Yep.
anyway.
Yep. Yeah. So there's all kinds of rights that are being fought for. We're not going to do all the questions in addition there, but just the end part, says evangelical Christians in North America are often marginalized in media and society as a whole. Should they lobby for better treatment? Why or why not? But the question I want you to answer is, how would trying to protect persecuted Christians in other countries be a different matter from evangelical Christians in North America fighting for their rights? How would those two things be different?
So it's a different part of the world, it's a different country.
Yes.
So they're going to have other rules that aren't the same.
Okay. So most of the Christians in other parts of the world that are persecuted, they're in countries where they don't have any rights,
Right.
basically. And so that's a difference. Is there anything else that you think of? How are those two situations fighting for rights different?
They can be killed.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
threat is a lot higher. The risk is a lot higher in those other countries.
Who would speak up for them?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What you find out is that the leaders of those countries often side with the ones who are persecuting them, like Fulani Muslims in Nigeria.
Yes, yeah. I think the direction Paul is going in these chapters that we're going to look at is, another difference is, for me to fight for my rights is one thing, but it's a different thing. It's a different level if I'm fighting for the rights of another person. That's a different thing. It's not for me that I'm doing this. I'm doing this for another person, for their rights, for their needs, their concerns. I think that's the direction Paul is going to go with this.
Pastor, real
yes.
quick, when I was working at the pregnancy center, I was pretty brand new into the pro-life movement, but I was very passionate. And I met a gentleman who had fought World War II, and he came in and he was talking and shared a lot of things. And he shared his whole story of why he was protesting up in front of the abortion clinics and what he was doing. And it wasn't protesting as much as praying and showing care. And I had a newfound respect for the whole issue because of talking with him. And I realized he wasn't called to help women directly, and I wasn't called to do up in front of the
Mhm.
abortion clinic, but everybody has their part
Yeah.
in whatever issue,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was a good lesson to learn.
Huh. Yeah, yeah, and that, what they fought for in World War II certainly relates to the right to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. The personal reflection question I thought was interesting. How do you react when you know you're right and yet someone continues openly to oppose you? How do you react?
I think you have to assess the situation.
Okay,
I mean, if you're in the debate and you have certain rules, then you follow those rules.
Yeah.
And if they react, you have to do your part. If you're out hunting like I was, and you have a discussion in the evening and someone really opposes you, you just realize to keep the peace, you sometimes have to just
okay,
be quiet.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Suppose if they're opposing you by continuing to beat that little child right in front of you,
Okay.
it's a whole different situation. If
Yes.
it's an opposition of opinion,
right,
then you can agree to disagree, but
Yeah.
if you need to rescue that child from an adult that's beating it or
Yeah.
something, you need to step in there.
Initially, we get very defensive though, don't we?
okay, you
Yes.
get
I mean,
defensive,
that's
might be a
kind of like,
reaction. Yeah.
we're at a fight or something.
Yeah. Yeah,
You get defensive.
I think sometimes you have to decide what hill you want to die on.
yeah,
Decide
Yeah.
if it's something that needs to be really dealt with, and that's how serious it might be. Like I kind of think I heard somebody talking about children
yeah,
and if they're being abused or whatever.
and I think the thing that came to my mind first, how do you react? Was the word frustration. Just feel frustrated that, this is right, but the other person is not listening at all, or, isn't willing to consider it even.
Mhm.
And so how do you feel is kind of the idea as well. So he goes on to say, so many of the struggles over rights, both those very legitimate and those less so, seem to revolve around attaining freedom to change the status quo. The Apostle Paul, however, appears to be on opposite ground. He's just written about remaining in the situation God calls us to, whether that is slavery or singleness, and remaining in step with God's commands. That was from chapter 7. Now we will see that Paul indeed practices what he preaches. For him, rights and freedoms are unimportant compared with the privilege of living for Christ. This study aims to move us away from running for ourselves, and toward running for Christ. So we're going to read chapter 8 to start with. And just to note as we start, the phrase at the beginning, now concerning food offered to idols, that now concerning tells us this is very likely an issue that the Corinthians had written to him about in their letter that Paul is responding to. The same phrases in chapter 7, verse 1. Now concerning what you wrote about, this is what I have to say. So let's go ahead, if you got verses 1 through 6 and 7 through 13 of chapter 8, let's read that chapter.
Now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. This knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone imagines that he knows something, he does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. Therefore, as to eating food offered to idols, we know that an idol has no real existence, and that there is no God but one. For although there may be so-called gods in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, from whom all things and from whom we exist, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom all are all things and through whom we exist.
However, some Christians don't realize this. All their lives, they have been used to thinking of idols as alive and have believed that food offered to the idols is really being offered to actual gods. So when they eat such food, it bothers them and hurts their tender consciences. Just remember that God doesn't care whether we eat it or not. We are no worse off if we don't eat it and no better off if we do. But be careful not to use your freedom to eat it, lest you cause some Christian brother to sin whose conscience is weaker than yours. You see, this is what may happen. Someone who thinks it is wrong to eat this food will see you eating at a temple restaurant, for you know there is no harm in it. Then he will become bold enough to do it too, although all the time he still feels it is wrong. So because you know it is all right to do it, you will be responsible for causing great spiritual damage to a brother with a tender conscience for whom Christ died. And it is a sin against Christ to sin against your brother by encouraging him to do something he thinks is wrong. So if eating meat offered to idols is going to make my brother sin, I'll not eat any of it as long as I live, because I don't want to do this to him.
All right, thanks. So question 1, sacrificial animals offered in temples were dedicated to a pagan god, and most of them were sold in the public market. Understandably, many Christians in Corinth wondered whether they should eat such meat. According to Paul, what do mature Christians know about food sacrificed to idols? So what are the things that we know as you look at verses 4 and 6 and 8?
There is only one God, there is.
Yeah, so there is only one God. There's only one God, Father, who's creator, one Lord Jesus Christ. There's only one God. What else do we know?
Therefore, the idols have no real existence.
Yeah, the idol has no real existence. There's only one God, so there's no other gods. What else do we know?
Since there are no idols, they cannot contaminate meat.
Okay.
because They don't exist.
Yes, and so verse 8,
Says
eating
here-
the food or not eating the food doesn't matter. No big deal.
Was it only the Jewish people that felt they shouldn't eat the God? It was everybody that became a Christian.
Yes,
whether they were
and
even-
here it's probably more the Gentiles.
Oh, okay.
Because, the issue was they've been involved with the idolatry
Yes.
all their life.
Yeah.
And now it was hard for them to deal with that aspect of the culture because of their past history. So what warning does Paul give about this kind of knowledge in verses 1 through 3? It says, we know this, we know this, we know this, but he gives a warning about that kind of knowledge. What's the warning?
Well, if you sin against them, you sin against Christ.
Yes, that's what he ends up
That's what it
saying.
says in,
Yeah. So this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
What does this knowledge tend to do?
It puffs us up. We think we
Yeah.
know more so
Yes.
than we really do, and where love builds us up.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different ballgame, a whole different
Yes.
category.
Yeah, this kind of knowledge puffs up, love builds up. Verse 2, you might think you know something, but love reminds us that we need to be humble. Recognize we don't know everything. There's limits on our knowledge.
Got a question?
Yes.
If it wasn't a sin to eat the meat, and because people have free choice, can you give a little more information as to why you would be guilty if they would eat it and somebody else didn't? I'm kind of not seeing the connect there.
Well, and that's the important question here. What exactly is it that he's talking about? How does this work? And that really goes with question 2. What does Paul say is more important than exercising the freedom that comes from knowledge? If you look at verses 9 through 13, what's more important than that exercising that freedom?
you don't want to hurt an unbeliever. I mean, it says you might destroy the weaker brother. Well,
Yes.
if doing that destroys him, then you've really hurt somebody.
Yeah. And what is the phrase Paul uses to talk about the danger? What might we be to that weaker brother. Yeah, don't be a stumbling block.
Yeah,
You know, that's what he's concerned about. Don't do something that might result in someone else losing their faith.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what might this look like in that context? You know, and most likely the picture is, you know, they've been taught and told there is only one God. All these idols aren't real. You know, there's nothing to them. They've been taught that. But I think what he says in verse 7 is especially helpful. You know, however, not all possess this knowledge, but some through former association with idols eat food as really offered to idols. Their conscience being weak is defiled. So somebody goes to a meal, there's meat that's being served at the meal. Question comes up, should we eat this meat or not? It might have been sacrificed to idols. The one person is like, there's no problem. We've been told, we know it's true, there's only one God, idols are nothing. So I can go ahead and eat the meat. The other Christian who's there goes, I know that's what they said, but idols are real. You know, these gods are real.
Do you think that is what they were thinking?
I think they would have not, if they were pressed intellectually, they would have said, no, they're not. But because of their former association, because that's all they knew,
that's all they knew.
in their heart, in their conscience, they still felt like there was a reality there.
I thought it was more that they realized that idol worship was a sin. They know that that was a sin. And they don't want to have anything to do with eating meat that involves that sin. That's how I've always taken that.
Well, but yeah, I mean, that's true. But Paul is saying, you're not involved in that sin.
But that's how eating that meat that was involved
Right.
in that sin makes me feel like I'm involved in.
Yes, yes,
I
they
don't-
felt like they were sinning
Yeah, but
if they ate that meat.
I don't know that they necessarily thought those idols were real.
Could that be similar to like the vaccine?
In what way?
Well, the vaccine, some of them have used aborted fetus.
Oh,
DNA,
Mhm.
Oh,
a lot of aborted fetuses
Yeah,
in order to
yeah.
develop the vaccine.
Yeah, yeah.
Some folks are saying, you know,
Yeah.
Johnson & Johnson is actively using
hmm
fetuses
Mhm.
in the production of
Mhm.
the vaccine.
yeah,
And I know some people
hmm
feel like, gosh, you know,
yeah,
this is really bad, but
yeah.
then when you look at the whole thing, you know, this could be a real
Yes,
dicey situation,
Yeah.
similar to this.
yeah, yeah. And I think there is, yeah, I mean, there are principles here that should be applied to that situation. Yeah.
I think, I'm gonna look at it from more of a theological perspective. I put that in quotes. Becky's theological perspective. Anyway, I'm gonna throw out an educated guess. You know, no matter who you are and where you've lived in your life, if somebody said, will you make it into heaven? And they say, well, someone says, yeah, I hope I'll be good enough. I hope I didn't do too many bad things. I think the people back then were so fastidious, trying to do everything right by God's way. And if they didn't, they were fearful they weren't going to make it into heaven. And so this eating of the meat was just another example of, you can't eat that meat or else you're not going to make it into heaven. And, you know, and so it just makes sense to me that they're so concerned about it,
Mhm.
but they don't understand what Jesus did and died on the cross and how that's all been washed away.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know, I mean, but the point is, whatever the
Yeah.
particular reason that that weaker brother
Mhm.
felt like, if I eat that meat, I'm committing sin.
Mm.
The situation was that weaker brother in that setting looked over and said, but they're eating meat and they're part of my church. So it must be okay for me to eat it too. And so they go ahead and partake, but afterwards they go, I shouldn't have. I knew it was wrong and I still did it. I've sinned. I purposely chose to do something against God. And the danger is that they're so messed up by that, that they end up walking away from the faith. I can't be a Christian anymore.
Wouldn't feel good enough anymore.
Well, it could go all kinds of directions, but that was the danger, is this Christian who is doing what is perfectly fine. He's eating the meat because there's nothing wrong with it. But because he sees that weaker brother and knows that's the situation, he ends up being a part of that weaker brother's falling away. And Paul says, I will do whatever I need to do to keep that weaker brother from falling.
But people can learn, right? I mean, you could be of the opinion that something was a sin and wrong, but as you become more knowledgeable in the faith and study scripture, you can see that maybe wasn't a sin and change your
And
thinking.
I think that Paul had taught them that. He was trying to get them to see that. And I think that would have continued to happen. That was the desire. But Paul's point is, you don't push your weaker brother to test the limits of their conscience. You let God work in their heart through the word to learn and eventually come to the point of understanding. But it's not your job to push them to do that. You got to leave that up to God. So.
Well, you said something in your sermon, I listened to it that you had on Sunday. The normal response is, well, let's just go teach them the right thing.
Right.
But it's better just to let them come to that conclusion.
That always amazed me about this passage. It's like, why didn't God just say, you guys teach them the right way? Straighten them out, fix their thinking. That would have made more sense to me. But he doesn't say that. He says, instead, you make sure you don't do anything that's going to push that weaker brother to go against his conscience.
So it's being sensitive to them.
Yes.
Sometimes teaching is very appropriate, right?
Right.
It's just being
And
very sensitive.
that's what I say, there still probably would have been the teaching going on in the context of the church. But in terms of practice and what I do in my life, I need to make sure I'm careful about how what I do affects that weaker brother. That's amazing.
Being gentle in how you present the gospel and stuff. Not shove it in your face.
Yes.
That's a big job.
And the hard
It
thing
is.
is,
We
don't know what other people are thinking.
It's just it. Or if they're sitting there resisting eating the meat, you can see they're questioning it. You would just maybe remove them so they don't see those other Christians and go to a corner. I don't know.
And you wonder how this would have worked out in practice. But the implication is Paul's talking about a situation where that person who was stronger in the faith knew that they were in a situation where that weaker brother might be affected.
Saying I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I just cannot. I don't feel right about it, so you just go with that.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we could not play face cards.
Oh,
That was a sin.
Was a sin.
really?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
and so I couldn't play face cards.
Ingrained.
Then I married Jim. And it just rattled me. It just rattled me.
Yeah.
But he didn't push it or anything and didn't call me weirdo or anything. But so things apart.
Yeah.
You made me thought of it.
Yeah. So, But the reason I bring that up is because how do you know what somebody feels is wrong? You know,
Hard
so
to
that you
know.
can be careful.
Yeah.
Because I remember people that I know were Christians that did play cards, and I could not understand that.
Yeah.
But they didn't know that that's how I was brought up.
Right, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
You
You
know,
know, there-
in this setting though, you know, it was a very clear common
Yeah,
cultural
that's
issue
true.
that they were
That's-
dealing with.
Okay.
And so that's, you know, that's
Yeah.
part of it is we can't know
Yeah.
what other people are thinking
Right.
always. And so, you know, we might do something that bothers another Christian that we aren't even aware of.
Right.
You know,
a lesson to us, a lesson to me, you know, to be careful not to judge
yeah,
somebody who's doing something that I might
Right,
think is wrong,
right.
because I may be wrong.
Exactly, we might be doing things they
Yeah.
think are.
Yeah.
We're kind of talking about this, so we should look at question 3. What knowledge and freedom that you currently enjoy would you be willing to give up
Mm.
in order to not destroy a weaker brother?
Don't play cards around me. people. I've gotten over it, I have.
Are there things that we think about in our culture where a Christian might choose to give up a freedom in order to not destroy a weaker brother? Do you think of any other examples?
I think about drinking
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
how,
Yes.
to some people, it's
Yeah.
just not right, it's not done, you don't
Mhm.
touch it. And to a lot of other people, it's okay to
Mhm.
drink some.
Yeah.
So that was one that came
Yeah.
to my mind.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
And so, you know, I might be in a situation where I know it would be perfectly fine to have a drink, but because I know that other people are there, that would be offensive to them,
Yeah.
I choose not to. You know, that would be a
Or
way
even
this could be
harmful.
applied.
I mean,
Yeah,
when you think about,
Yeah.
you know, addictions, you know.
yes, yeah,
To
yeah,
know that they had,
Yeah.
you know, if somebody was there,
yeah,
that
yeah.
might, yeah,
Yeah.
that might work well.
Are there any other situations that you think of?
I was brought up so sheltered and conservative. We didn't dance either, and so that was really hard for me.
Love those
That was
North
super
Dakota
hard.
people.
Oh,
Yeah.
that Lutheran Norwegians.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
As far as
The
knowledge, I was
German
thinking
Mennonites.
giving up your opinion about politics, you know, or
Sure.
climate
Yeah.
change, you know.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
incidental when it's compared
Yes.
to the gospel.
Yeah,
You
Yes.
know,
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
go on your deathbed thinking, boy, I'm sure I convinced them to be a Republican or a Democrat. You know,
Yeah.
you go on your
Yeah.
deathbed thinking,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure the gospel.
yeah, that I don't have to
Yeah.
convince everybody.
Right, to think like me.
You know, I don't, if it's going to push them away
Right.
from
It's
Christ,
not worth.
yeah,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Got a
I even
comment.
thought about movies, you know,
Yeah.
growing to this show.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
What movie do I
situation,
go
what you,
to?
how you were raised, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah,
Kathy was gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, I have a little trouble with how the fact that people have, you know, their freedom of making their own choices, you know? I mean, we have for how we react to a lot of things. I mean, it would seem like even some of the examples we're bringing up, I mean, obviously you pointed out, we're not mind readers. And it's hard for me to understand why people would have to take on a lot of guilt unless you're really, you know, what's your intent? Is your intent to kind of give somebody, maybe put a roadblock in their path? Or if you don't know, I mean, this is kind of you know, it's a hard thing because I probably go about every day doing things that other people don't like and maybe stand in their way and whatever. I don't necessarily think I'm doing anything that's illegal or, you know what I'm saying, or those kind of things.
It's kind of when you do know.
It's like
Yeah.
The person has you know, problem with it, or
Right.
their conscience would bother them that
Yeah.
you're doing it. That, I think this is more, when you have a knowledge
Yeah.
that somebody would be offended
Yeah.
or.
yeah. If I know
yes.
that there's, you know, a person that's going to have a problem with what I do or say.
Yeah.
And not just have a problem with, but that it would have the potential to affect their spiritual life.
Wow.
That's what Paul's talking about. I know this is an issue that person has a problem with,
Yeah.
and there's a potential that it'll affect their relationship to God. Then I need to step back and say, I need to be willing to give up my freedom in this situation. And, Paul, what we're going to talk about in a minute, he talks about, to the Jew, I became a Jew, to the person without the law, I become a person without the law. Paul, wouldn't eat food that wasn't kosher when he was among Jews where it would bother them and it would hinder the gospel. But in other settings, he insisted on eating food that wasn't kosher. So he wouldn't offend Gentiles and make them think that that's the way to get to heaven. And so it depended on the setting that he was in, the practical way that he applied things. And, that might be the case with us too, where, the person in Corinth, there might be some settings where they would eat the meat because they knew nobody was going to be bothered by it. But in a setting where they knew somebody was, they'd say, I'm not going to eat that either. So
Then you get called a hypocrite.
yes, you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get back to that.
That's what Paul dealt with.
They didn't have
Too.
Facebook back then.
I was watching Billy Graham, and he was on the Tonight Show.
Mm,
He'd go to a lot of
yeah,
venues
yeah,
that were not considered
Yeah.
very practical or appropriate for someone who is an evangelist.
Yeah.
But somehow he was always Billy Graham.
yeah,
But he did try not to offend them
yes.
or say, John, you've been married 6 times. And
Yeah.
but he always was gracious to them, and it seemed like he was a very good role model.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he didn't, it
Yeah.
just seemed like he made people feel good, but he was at the same time, this one comment he made where, we're all sinners, even you, John, you're a sinner too.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like that. But they kind of knew, or they respected each other,
Yeah.
and they're not trying to say things that are going to offend him or make him feel like he's out of whack, or his Christian faith
Yeah.
is something wrong with it, and he was
Right.
not trying to.
Right.
He was trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately he walked away and you feel like somehow he was growing, both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's an example of, he wasn't afraid to speak the truth,
Right.
but he wasn't out to push the person away by saying things that were clearly offensive to them. Yeah. I think we're going to skip question 4 and go right to question 5 and read the next section, 1 Corinthians 9, 1 through 18. So if you've got starting in verse 1, we'll read those sections through verse 18.
Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not? And are not you my workmanship in the Lord? If to others I am not an apostle, at least I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. This is my defense to those who would examine me.
Don't we have the right to food and drink? Don't we have the right to take a believing wife along with us, as do the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Cephas? Or is it only I and Barnabas who lack the right to not work for a living? Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink milk? Do I say these things on human authority? Does not the law say the same? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads out the grain. Is it for oxen that God is concerned? Does he not certainly speak of our sake? It was written for our sake, because the plowman should plow in the hope, and the thresher
fresh in the hope of sharing in the crop. If we have sown spiritual things among you, is it too much if we reap material things from you? If others share this rightful claim on you, do not we even more? Nevertheless, we have not made use of this right, but we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ.
Don't you know that those who work in the temple get their food from the temple, and those who share at the altar share in what is offered on the altar? In the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. But I have not used any of these rights, and I am not writing this in hope that you will do such things for me. I would rather die than have anybody deprive me of this boast. Yet when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, for I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. If I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntary, I am simply discharged the trust committed to me. Then what then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel, I may offer in free of charge, and so to make use of my rights in preaching.
All right, thanks. So, question 5, Paul moves on from rights and freedom based on knowledge to the topic of rights based on position. What apostolic rights has Paul given up? What are the rights that he mentions there?
Compensation.
Yes, the right to get paid for preaching and teaching.
It says though in verse 14, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. Isn't he disobeying if that's a command?
The command was to the people who are hearing the gospel, not to the preacher of the gospel, I think.
Commanded that
Verse
those who
14.
proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel.
So if, yeah, it's a command to the congregation.
Oh, okay, I thought it was to the.
Yeah, and I know,
The gospel.
Yeah.
Oh,
Says, so also the Lord directed those who proclaim the gospel.
that's what mine says.
those who proclaim the gospel to get their living by the gospel.
Well,
and
like
so-
the preacher proclaims the gospel.
Yeah.
And that's how he makes his living, by proclaiming the gospel.
Yes,
So doesn't that
But
mean he should?
he, so I don't think we should read that to say the preacher should demand getting paid.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. No,
Because
that's what I'm not-
God said I'm supposed to, so you guys better pay me.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that's what Paul is saying.
Okay.
I think what he's saying is God gave the
Yeah.
command, those who preach the gospel should get their living by the
Yeah, I
gospel.
just thought it was a command to the preacher to accept what was offered to him, but it's not. Okay, not to demand it from the people, but accept what was offered by the people, but not so, okay.
Because otherwise Paul's sinning by what he says.
Yeah.
And by what he does, and he's making clear he's not sinning.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
you know, it's a command that's given to the congregation. You guys need to pay your preacher. You know, that's the command.
Yeah, because like my paraphrase just says that those who preach the gospel should be supported by those who accept it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And that's the intent of it.
Okay, I guess. mine's-
You know, Paul repeatedly stresses that truth, you know, that should be what happens. That the preacher is paid by the congregation,
He's not expecting.
but he's refusing it, basically.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't want people to think he's in it for the money.
Okay, and
Oh,
yes,
sure.
and that's question 6. You know, how can receiving financial benefits, even a mere living as a preacher, sometimes hinder the gospel? And that's a danger
Yeah, it
that
is.
people think the only reason he's preaching is because he wants to get paid,
Yeah.
you know? So that can be something that happens.
And I wonder if some of those false teachers or other teachers that he talked about earlier, I mean, maybe they were in it for the money. and
Yes.
So he didn't
That
want
was
to
part of
be
his.
associated
yes,
with that
Yeah,
group of
but
teachers.
that's an interesting piece of this is most likely what part of what's going on here is the Corinthians were questioning Paul's apostolic authority.
Oh,
And one of the reasons they were is because he wasn't accepting pay. Because that was the cultural norm. There were lots of traveling teachers, and they made their living through their teaching. If they were good teachers, they got paid well. If they weren't, they didn't get paid very much. But, Paul comes saying, I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ, but don't pay me.
that's right.
And the Corinthians are going, if he really was an apostle, he'd get paid.
So was he a stumbling block for them?
Good question.
But that's part of what he's doing here is he's saying, I need you to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Okay.
It has nothing to, I am an apostle, I am called by God, but me personally, I don't want to get paid by you.
Hmm.
And that's a different thing than you should pay your preacher, because you still should. The next guy that comes along, you better pay him, but don't pay me.
And he had his tent business. Is that
Yeah.
what?
Yes, that was part of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Did they
Part of
also
it,
feed him too, though? I mean,
well,
help him, or they didn't do that either?
who knows the details of it.
Yeah.
Part of it was, Paul was a missionary. He was going to new places. Today we don't, we didn't send
Right.
Joris to Uganda and say, when you get to the new village, you're going to need to raise your funds for your
Yeah.
dad.
Right.
We paid him
Yeah.
That's true.
so that
He
he
can
wouldn't
go.
have to demand pay from those he preached to.
Right.
And
That's
that's
right.
part of what Paul did, because
Yeah.
he did accept gifts from other
He
congregations.
did, that's right.
Where he wasn't preaching at the
That's
time.
right.
That makes sense.
So that was going on too. But that was part of the deal was they were objecting to his being an apostle because he didn't take money.
Mhm.
If he really was an apostle, he should have taken money.
He had
Really
other
good, but
problems.
he takes a
though.
lot of money.
Paul had other problems though, too. I mean, he did not walk the earth for 3 years with the other 12.
Right, right,
were
right.
lying.
Yes. And so there were other things that made them question his authority as well. Yeah, yeah. So,
It's amazing how he fit into every city he went to.
yes,
All the
yes.
different like
Yes.
Corinth and Ephesus, no,
Yeah,
he just fit in.
Yeah.
with the people.
yeah. And I mean, we see part of why he was able to do that, but I mean, we have to say too, he was, God was using him.
Mhm.
God was behind what he was doing. And so God made the way for him. God opened the doors, God made the connections. That's why it worked. We're not gonna answer question 7. It's a personal question really, but it's a question, kind of a big question in terms of practical application. What practical choices have you made in your life that might be hindering the spread of the gospel? And as you look at these chapters, that's a question we need to ask ourselves is, are there things in my life that are hindering my being a witness for Jesus? And if there are, I need to be willing to make changes and to do things differently. So that's an important question as we look at this. But we want to read the last section, verses 19 through 27. So if you got starting verse 19, let's go ahead and read through the end of the chapter.
For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I may by all means save some. And I do all things for the sake of the gospel, that I may become a fellow partaker of it.
Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize.
All right, thanks. So question 8, how and why has Paul given up the freedom to live whatever lifestyle he prefers? How and why has he given those freedoms up?
You want people to identify with him.
Yes, yep, and he did that in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else would we say? How and why has Paul given up the freedom to live whatever lifestyle he prefers? What is his goal?
Well, he wants them to be won over to the gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants to be a servant of Christ. He wants the people to be saved, to come to Christ, to salvation. And so he makes himself a servant of all.
Maybe
So-
this is kind of what Billy Graham did when he went on those shows,
Yeah,
trying to reach out to an audience he might normally not come in contact with.
yeah. And he adjusted his approach as he did that. Yeah. So that definitely fits with this. So question 9, how might we adjust our lifestyles in order to reach people in various subcultures? What would be examples of what we might do today to try to reach people?
It's kind of tough, only because, like when we're thinking about the drinking one, having used to have done that, I used to think that was okay to do, but now I refuse pretty much to do it. I'm afraid if I went into a setting and tried to share Christ in a bar, my drinking would make them stumble, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's why I would really
Yeah.
find it difficult
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Years ago, I wouldn't have, but I don't think I was sharing the gospel very well either. You know what I'm saying?
And this would be very personal.
Yeah.
Depends on you, your situation, the setting, who you're trying to reach. But can you think of examples where we might adjust our lifestyle to reach people? What might be some things that we could do?
You can go to places you normally don't go.
Sure.
Help in the soup kitchen or
Yeah.
just hang out at a beach. I know one of the gals from this congregation, they have to go on the beach and witness to people.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk up to people and do that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
she did it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That makes me think of the Waikiki Beach.
Oh,
yeah,
They
exactly.
just did a community service type thing, along with a surf magazine place and a surf rental place.
Yeah.
Neither of those two businesses are Christian,
Mhm,
but they went together
mhm,
because they enjoy surfing and beach stuff, and they were serving the community.
Mhm.
mhm.
That's amazing.
That is.
Yeah,
That's
That's-
great.
That's really good.
it was an interesting thing to do,
Mhm.
to partner
Yeah.
with two non-Christian
Mhm.
entities kind of, and do this
Yeah,
service.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can be in a lot of normal settings especially if you're in business.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
are all types of settings
Yeah.
that you can be in, but you can still be a good witness without, practicing proper etiquette.
Mhm.
You go to China and, they fill up your glass with constantly. You cannot have an empty glass. They'll fill it up with some kind of alcohol.
Yeah.
And you can just take a sip and smile and
find the
eat,
nearest smile.
Yeah.
but you just, and you can still be a good
Yeah.
friend,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
Yes.
you have to.
Yeah.
In fact, one time, usually if I would go out to a place, I went out to this was a remote area in China, and the general manager for the company was going to be there that we were working on a project with. And they expect whatever the guest has, then you should have the same thing that they're drinking.
Mm.
Well, I get sick on red wine. I just can't, it just doesn't agree at all.
Mhm.
And so the first thing he did was he filled up his glass with red wine. So everyone had, and these aren't like a wine glass, it's like a cup. And I'm looking at that, oh boy. And so they toasted me because I was a guest where I was from. And I took a little sip and I set it down. Normally you're supposed to throw it all the way down.
sure.
And I just, there's no way.
Yeah.
And so the general manager, they toasted him and he took a little sip too, and he leaned over and he said, I appreciate that. He said, I don't like to drink so much at one time either.
Oh.
But it was, it just really worked out.
Oh.
And we got along well.
Wow, that was nice.
Yeah.
God protected you there.
Yeah.
But I know that,
Good
talking to people who've gone on mission trips to India, for example, and they talk about, you go into this setting, you get invited to home or this, event or whatever. It's like, you eat what they set in front of you.
Yeah.
And it's not the best.
But, that's what you do. I don't know if any of you get the AFLC World Missions newsletters, but a couple of months ago, Matthew Abel talked about them having a meal where they ate eel. And, he didn't explain it, didn't go into detail, but the impression I got was, in the culture that they're in Paraguay, that's a normal food. And so it's like, if we're gonna be here and be a part of the culture, that's what we're gonna do.
I just heard of one the other day. I was listening, and missionaries in Africa and the little boys in the tribe, their absolute favorite snack, like Snicker bars in here, are these black beetles. And these kids would go chasing after these black beetles, and this missionary had to pony up and have his share.
Wow.
But the idea is, are we willing to adjust what we like, what is important to us, what we feel comfortable with, if it means being able to share Christ with somebody? What are we willing to do? The question 10, I think, was interesting. Can we go too far in contextualizing of the gospel? Explain, for example, how about taking on the religious practices of Islam for the sake of Muslim evangelism?
Hardly.
Okay, and so, we do need to be careful here. We can't compromise the gospel when we're trying to share the gospel. We can't endorse things that are false, But, I think about with that example, if you're in a cultural setting where you're trying to be a witness to Muslims, and it's time for one of their 5 prayer times in the day,
You don't go
I
back
can stop and pray,
To your God.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing, yeah.
To God,
But,
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with praying 5 times a day.
No.
We didn't even make clear who we're praying to,
Yes, right.
but, that cultural practice, and I might change, I might kneel down and pray, instead of the form that it would usually take.
But then are the Christians looking at you thinking he's praying to the
Well,
Muslim God? I
and
mean,
that's, that's the danger, that's
Yeah.
the challenge. How does
Yeah.
this work in practice?
Yeah.
But, that's the question, that we have to find that balance. We need to be willing to give up our freedoms without going too far and compromising the truth, compromising the gospel.
That's where we really.
And
need the
that's a
Holy
challenge
Spirit to-
sometimes to know exactly how to
to
do
guide
that.
us.
Yeah.
That's it? Can you hear me?
Yep.
I had another question back, a question or so. Somebody brought up this Waikiki thing, or,
Mhm.
Billy Graham going to this. How does that fit in with maybe for the week? Can that appear to be a stumbling block? That it appears Billy Graham, I think, being on nighttime shows or people involving it with, religion, with whatever they're doing on the beach for fun and stuff like that. How does that not look possibly be, well, I guess I already asked the question. I mean, wouldn't that also possibly be an issue?
And I think that's part of the challenge. And Billy Graham faced that. He had people upset with him for doing that kind of thing. But I think there's, and again, it's a challenging question. How do you know how far to go? What am I doing here? Am I opening the door for the gospel, or am I hurting my weaker brother?
It's all about being in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah.
Are you affecting the world, or is the world
Yes.
affecting you? And then you have to
Yes.
step
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Like Marlene and Kyle, they
Yeah.
were most likely inspiring the unbelievers.
Right.
Marcia's saying the Holy Spirit be your guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is challenging. But I think the other thing that's possible here is, and I think that enters into what you were saying, Kathy. The Christian needs to be careful of doing something that causes their weaker brother to sin. That weaker brother will look at that and go, since they do it, and it's okay, it must be okay for me, even though I really think it's not okay for me. That's the situation Paul's talking about. Paul would not say, for example, the person who would say Billy Graham was sinning by appearing on the late night talk show with such a terrible sinner. And so I'm going to be mad at Billy Graham and not like his ministry. Because there you're not dealing with a weaker brother. Billy Graham wasn't causing that weaker brother to compromise and go into secularism. They were mad at Billy Graham and were upset with him. They weren't, I might do that same sin. That wasn't the issue. And so that's not the weaker brother.
This discussion
Paul is
reminds
doing
me
it.
so much of Zacchaeus and Jesus.
Yes, yeah. And Jesus being accused of being a friend of sinners. That didn't stop Jesus from being a friend of sinners. Because the people who were objecting to it weren't, I'm going to be a friend of sinners too, and might compromise my faith. They were Pharisees who wouldn't have anything to do with sin.
They're not gonna go near them.
And so there's a lot of things
Motivation.
going on here that make it challenging to know exactly how to apply this in a particular situation. It's not easy. There's lots of room for, various ways to approach this. And that's why we really need to be in God's word and dependent on him for guidance. But, here, the message overall that's coming through is, am I willing to do what I need to do to bring the gospel to people who need it? That's the direction. But we need to close, so let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your word. Lord, we live in a world that is challenging. We're fallen, we're sinners, and we live in a world that's full of sin. But Lord, help us to see that you call us to be a light, to be a witness. Help us to be willing to adjust what's comfortable or easy for us if we can make a difference in the lives of others. Lord, thank you for this time and the good time of talking together. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. So next week, we're doing session 8, looking at 1 Corinthians 10, but just to know, because of Harvest Festival, we're going to be doing the study before we do the sermon. And we're going to be doing that for a few weeks. So just go ahead and do the lesson.
Lift
That's
it
what we're
around.
doing next week, even though you haven't heard the sermon on it yet.
I don't know. I wanted to try rattlesnake, but
I've had that.
I think that sounds okay.
I feel the gun bug.